there's lots of points of failure up and down the chain, regardless really of how big your event is. So scale, in a sense, could be somehow proportionally related to the amount of infrastructure you have to support it. So I'm curious about, I'm going to lead into this next question because, Will, you did bring up Netflix. So let's talk a little bit about Netflix. And I'm gonna caveat this, right? We're totally supposing, right? Because the only people who really know how the Tyson-Paul match had quality issues are the people that are within that ecosystem. And so I just want to say that as a caveat, but I want to talk about this because there were quality issues. People noticed it, they wrote about it, lots of people talked about it. So, maybe Will, maybe you can kick this off for us and everyone can jump in afterwards, but what might have been the problem here with the quality issues related to that event?
So I see a different story here, which I'm going to answer this, right? So everyone says, oh my God, there were 1 million people who had rebuffering issues, right? And this was talked about in the press and not. The story I see it is completely different. 59 million people didn't have rebuffering issues.
I like that.
That's huge. That's from a company that 2 years ago, I think March 23 was Netflix's first live event. So in 2 years, they've ramped up to deliver 59 million rebuffer-free sessions. That's fantastic. I think the issues that occurred, and it's not for us to say how or where they occurred. The engineering and Netflix India team are very, very capable. They know those issues. They are not going to happen again, right? They are going to solve those, and new issues will open up, but they will diminish over time. They have a fantastic capability to deliver live traffic. They're doing it from a platform. They're vertically integrated. They control the player, the delivery network. They're doing all that network planning that I spoke about earlier. So I have a very different view. Seeing all the challenges that come with scale of that size, I thought they did very, very well. And I think it's a distraction to talk about some of the rebuffering that happened. If it happens for the next 3 live events, yes, that's a failure to solve problems. But I don't think Netflix are going to fail to solve those problems.
No, and it didn't with the Christmas football, right? It actually went very, very, very well. Different amount of concurrence and scale, but still very well, very well. So anybody, Christy, Sean, anybody, Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think some of the unpredictability of the Tyson-Paul match originated with the social nature of Jake Paul's fan base. And so that is something that is really different from the NFL, which it is fairly predictable. Even if you haven't streamed an NFL game on Christmas before, it's a fairly predictable audience. Whereas the combat sports fan base and the social fan base that Jake Paul brings with him brought an element of unpredictability to that event that I think perhaps would have been very difficult for even the savviest streamer to prepare for, along with the idea that multiple devices in a household might be streaming at the same time, multiple devices from the same account. It brought with it a lot of pretty tricky aspects. And, I think the one last thing I'd say about it is that I don't think Netflix is held to similar standards as, for instance, a broadcaster streaming an event. So there is a little bit more wiggle room for them to experiment and take risks and fail.
I can't prognosticate about what actually went wrong, right? None of us know unless we were part of the engineering team. But to echo Will's sentiment that it's doing live at scale is really hard. Netflix does VOD at scale. YouTube does VOD and live at massive scale. But when you get these live events, it's a lot different, especially due to the peaky sort of bursty traffic patterns that alluded to earlier. I think a lot of this is related to capacity planning on the CDN side, but also partnerships with the ISPs, the big ASNs, the ones that have known congestion issues. At a certain point, a CDN can throw as many servers as they want at this, but if there's congestion at the peering points at the last mile ISPs, there's very little they can actually do. Netflix's topology is to build pretty deep into the ISPs, just like YouTube's. I think that's the way you're really going to scale live video, as more and more, especially even in the mobile networks, getting as close to the cell towers as possible, is really how you're going to scale this to 50, 60 plus million viewers and deliver a high quality experience. it's one thing to throw multiple CDNs at the problem, which is, you know, what a lot of the big broadcasters do. We did it at Paramount Plus, and it's necessary, but I don't know if it's sufficient when you reach that sort of scale.
You all brought up something that's really important. I think that we overlook sometimes in streaming is the relationship between the content owner and the delivery partners, whether those be the CDN or the ISP, right? And so Sean talked about peering points. And I think there was some discussion about that with the Netflix event, that some of the ISPs run their circuits and the peering points differently. They have them at 80% capacity, maybe instead of 40%. So they can't absorb a huge spike, which is what you talked about, which what Christy mentioned, right? Which is this massive thundering herd, and Will mentioned it. And so there's this real relationship that has to happen between these big content events and those ISPs and those independent ASs. I mean, it's really, really important. And I think, you know, that's something that as an industry, we don't pay attention to as much because, you know, for most of us, it's not important. It's really important for those capacity planners and those folks that are network engineers responsible for that.